All right, everyone, buckle up, because today we are diving headfirst into the wild world of conspiracy theories. We're cracking open a book that doesn't hold back on bold claims, folks. It's called AntichristConspiracy.pdf.
Oh, this is going to be good. I've heard whispers about this one. It's quite a trip. You're not kidding about the bold claims. This book dives into a whole bunch of historical events, religious institutions, and influential figures, all through the lens of, well, conspiracy.
Yeah, it's like the author took one look at all those global events, the ones that make you scratch your head and go, what was really going on there? And decided they had it all figured out. They really think they cracked the code, and they want to take you, the reader, along for the ride.
And let me tell you, they get into it. I mean, we're talking biblical passages, historical figures, names, dates, even financial transactions, the whole 9 yards. They really want to convince you they've done their homework.
So let's dive right in. One of their core arguments, and they hit this hard right out of the gate, is that the Roman Catholic Church is basically, well, the puppet master for the Antichrist.
Yeah, they don't mince words, that's for sure. And it's not just a passing comment either. This idea permeates the entire book. They're basically saying the Catholic Church, with its doctrines and its actions throughout history, is like the ultimate antagonist to true Christianity.
It's almost like they're saying, forget what you think you know, we're going to show you the real story here. And they get very specific, pulling in papal pronouncements, the history of the Jesuits, even going as far as claiming there are different versions of the Bible floating around.
And that actually ties into another big part of their theory. They argue that a lot of modern Bible translations, especially the ones based on these old manuscripts, the Vaticanus and Sinaiticus manuscripts, have been corrupted. Like someone intentionally messed with the text to hide the real word of God.
Hold on, so it's not just the Catholic Church calling the shots. They're saying someone swapped out the real Bible with the knockoff.
Pretty much. And to make things even more interesting, they point to specific verses that have been omitted or wording that's been altered. According to them, the King James Version is the only true and trustworthy translation out there.
Talk about picking your battles, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, their distrust doesn't stop at the Bible. They see a hidden hand in all sorts of established institutions and practices, even ones that most people probably wouldn't think twice about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, they take aim at things like the veneration of saints, the Eucharist. Even Halloween gets dragged into this. They go on this whole tangent about how it's rooted in pagan rituals and suggest that modern celebrations are still somehow connected to these ancient practices.
It's like they're saying, don't be fooled by the costumes and candy. There's a darker, more sinister undercurrent at play here.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of leads us to another big player in their grand conspiracy theory: secret societies.
Ah, the classics. Got the Freemasons, the Illuminati, Skull and Bones. They all make an appearance. And of course, they're not just portrayed as these harmless groups meeting up for secret handshakes. The book wants you to believe these societies are incredibly powerful and influential, pulling strings behind the scenes to control global events.
And they're not afraid to name names either. We're talking historical figures like Albert Pike, Mayor Amschel Rothschild. They even implicate U.S. presidents, suggesting that they're all in on it, part of this grand scheme to manipulate world affairs. It's like they're saying, hey, look at all these powerful people throughout history. They're not who you think they are.
So they've got this web, right?
Yeah.
They're connecting all these threads, the Catholic Church, these secret societies, and now they're saying these groups are directly responsible for some of the most major and often tragic events in history.
Right. We're talking about things like the sinking of the Lusitania, the assassination of JFK, the Oklahoma City bombing, even 9/11. They get pulled into this grand narrative of manipulation and control. It's like they're saying none of these events were just random tragedies. Someone was behind them, pulling the strings, orchestrating it all for their own sinister purposes.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. They actually try to back up these claims with what they call evidence. We're talking about declassified documents, eyewitness accounts, even financial transactions, all presented as irrefutable proof that something fishy is going on.
It's like they're building a case file, right? Trying to convince you that there's no other possible explanation for these events other than what they're presenting.
And that's part of what makes conspiracy theories so captivating, right? They provide this alternative narrative, this sense that maybe, just maybe, things aren't what they seem. And when it comes to these tragic events that have shaped our world, it's natural for people to crave explanations, to seek understanding in the face of chaos.
It's like they tap into this primal need we have to make sense of things, especially when it feels like the world is spiraling out of control. And sometimes a conspiracy theory, with its clearly defined good guys and bad guys, can be more comforting than accepting the randomness and unpredictability of life.
Right. It's like, okay, so maybe things are messed up, but at least someone's in charge, even if they are the bad guys. But here's the thing, and this is where critical thinking comes in. Just because someone presents a compelling story doesn't make it true.
Okay.
We can't just accept these claims at face value. We have to be willing to dig deeper, to question the evidence, to consider alternative perspectives.
It's about being discerning consumers of information, right? And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's like holding up a mirror to how we process information, how we form our beliefs, and how susceptible we are to these grand narratives, especially when they confirm our existing biases or tap into our fears.
Exactly, and it forces us to ask some tough questions about who we trust, what we believe, and how we decide what's real in a world that's increasingly awash in information, misinformation, and everything in between. All right, so we're back, and wow, we are deep in the weeds with AntichristConspiracy.pdf. Last we left off, they were connecting the Catholic Church, secret societies, and every major historical event under the sun. Where do we even go from here?
Well, now they've got to bring it all together, Ray. They've got to connect the dots, show us the bigger picture, and that's where this whole grand battle idea comes in. They're basically arguing that everything we've talked about, the corrupted Bibles, the secret societies, it's all part of this cosmic struggle between good and evil.
Okay, so it's like a spiritual war playing out on the world stage, and they're saying, true, Christianity is caught right in the crossfire.
Exactly. And according to this book, there's no neutral ground. You're either on the side of good or the side of evil. There's no in between. It's very black and white thinking, which you see a lot in these kinds of conspiracy theories.
And that kind of framing can be really appealing to some people, right? Especially those who feel like they've been marginalized or ignored by the mainstream. This idea that there's this grand battle going on and they're part of this righteous fight against evil, it gives a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging.
Absolutely. It provides a framework for understanding a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable. And this sense of urgency, this call to action, it's a really powerful motivator.
Okay, so let's get back to those historical events. We touched on them earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about how this book tries to tie them into this grand conspiracy. What are some specific examples they give?
Well, they spend a good chunk of time on the sinking of the Lusitania, for example. You remember that was back in 1915 during World War I.
Yeah, it was a British ocean liner that was sunk by a German U-boat. A lot of Americans died, and it played a role in the U.S. eventually joining the war.
Right. But according to this book, it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a deliberate act orchestrated by these shadowy figures to draw the U.S. into the war. They claim the ship was carrying weapons and ammunition to Britain, and that the timing of the sinking was no coincidence.
So they're saying it was a setup. Like, they knew the ship would be sunk, and they used it as a way to manipulate the U.S. into joining the war.
Exactly. And they present all sorts of evidence to support this claim. They talk about the ship's cargo manifest, eyewitness accounts, even the timing of certain communications. But of course, it's all presented in a way that fits their narrative.
Right, like they're cherry-picking information to support their claims. And I imagine there are probably a lot of historians out there who would dispute their version of events.
Oh, absolutely. But that's the thing with conspiracy theories. They often rely on reinterpreting existing information, finding patterns where others might not see them, and presenting a narrative that confirms their worldview.
Okay, so we've got the Lusitania. What other events do they bring into this conspiracy?
Well, they also spend a lot of time on the JFK assassination. They basically reject the official findings of the Warren Commission and claim that Kennedy was killed by, well, pretty much everyone. They point fingers at the CIA, the mafia, even Lyndon B. Johnson.
It's like they watched the movie JFK and took it as a documentary.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They bring up all the usual conspiracy theory tropes. The magic bullet theory, the grassy knoll, the idea that there were multiple gunmen. They even go on about how key witnesses died under mysterious circumstances, implying that they were silenced to cover up the truth.
It's definitely a compelling story. I mean, it's like something out of a spy thriller. But again, it's important to remember that there's a difference between a compelling story and actual evidence.
Absolutely. And this book is full of compelling stories, but whether or not those stories are actually true, well, that's a different matter entirely.
So it seems like a common thread here is that they take these major historical events, events that often feel chaotic and confusing, and they try to impose order on them, even if that order is based on speculation and conjecture.
Exactly. And by doing so, they offer a sense of control in a world that can often feel very much out of control.
Right. It's like they're saying, Don't worry, it's not random chaos. It's all part of the plan, and we know what the plan is. Which I imagine can be very comforting to some people, even if it's based on a very selective reading of history.
And that's the danger, right? When we start to see conspiracies everywhere, when we start to believe that everything is connected and nothing is what it seems, it can really warp our perception of reality.
Absolutely. Okay, so they've got the Lusitania, they've got JFK. What else?
Well, they also bring up the Oklahoma City bombing.
That was in 1995, right? When Timothy McVeigh blew up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building.
Right. But according to this book, McVeigh was just a patsy, a fall guy for a much larger conspiracy. They claim that the bombing was actually carried out by the government as a way to discredit militia groups and justify stricter gun control laws.
So it's another example of them taking a tragic event and trying to spin it into this grand narrative of control and manipulation.
Exactly. And of course, they couldn't very well write a book about conspiracies without mentioning 9/11, could they?
Of course not. That's like the holy grail of conspiracy theories. All right, let's hear it. What's their take on 9/11?
Well, get ready, because this is where things really go off the rails.
All right, conspiracy fans, we're back. This is the final stretch of our deep dive into AntichristConspiracy.pdf. It's been a wild ride so far, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This book takes us on a whirlwind tour of religious deception, shadowy cabals, and yeah, those manipulated historical events we were just talking about.
It's like they're saying the world is a stage, but someone swapped out the script, and we're all just stumbling through our lines, totally clueless about the real drama unfolding behind the scene.
And they're adamant that this isn't just speculation. They present it all as fact. They're practically begging you to open your eyes, see the truth.
They want you to join their club, right? The enlightened few who are in the know. But as we've said before, just because someone claims to have all the answers doesn't mean they actually do.
Exactly. We have to be careful not to mistake confidence for credibility.
All right, so let's get back to 9/11. This is a big one, probably the most talked about event in conspiracy circles. How does AntichristConspiracy.pdf tackle this?
Well, they go all in. Remember how we talked about their idea of a Zionist agenda? They claim that 9/11 was orchestrated as a way to drum up fear, justify military intervention in the Middle East, and ultimately benefit Israel.
And they base this on things like what? The collapse of Building 7.
That and claims of insider trading based on foreknowledge of the attacks, the fact that no plane wreckage was found at the Pentagon. They even suggest that the planes themselves were holograms. It gets pretty out there.
Wow, holograms. That's a new one. It's like they took every 9/11 conspiracy theory they could find and threw it all into a blender.
Pretty much. But here's the thing, and this is important to remember. Just because something is widely circulated or repeated doesn't make it true. There's a difference between speculation and evidence-based conclusions.
Right. And when it comes to something as sensitive and tragic as 9/11, we have to be extremely careful about the kind of information we consume and share. It's easy to get caught up in the web of conspiracy theories, but it's important to remember that these theories often have very real consequences. They can fuel hatred, division, and even violence.
Absolutely. Words matter. And when we spread misinformation or make sweeping generalizations about entire groups of people, it can have a really damaging impact.
So what are we left with then? We've spent all this time unpacking the claims in AntichristConspiracy.pdf, exploring this world of secret societies, religious conspiracies, and manipulated history. What's the takeaway?
Well, if there's one thing I hope listeners will take away from this deep dive, it's the importance of critical thinking. Don't just accept everything you read, especially when it seems to confirm your existing biases.
Right. Question everything. Do your own research. And be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers, because the truth, as we've seen, is often far more complex and nuanced than any single narrative can capture.
Exactly. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us, whether we're talking about conspiracy theories or just navigating the world in general. Be curious, be skeptical, and don't be afraid to change your mind when presented with new information.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into AntichristConspiracy.pdf. It's been a journey, to say the least, but hopefully it's left you with more questions than answers, and a renewed appreciation for the power and the responsibility of critical thinking. Until next time, keep those minds open, folks.